Okay, I will mute myself.
Sandra, would you like to introduce Terry?
How is the volume for my voice?
Perfect.
Okay, so I see at the bottom of my screen Iris Phillips that I haven't seen in ages, and she's there with Patrick. It's so nice to see you, Iris. So it's my job to introduce Terry. It seems that every time Terry has something to present to PECFN, it's me that gets to do it for him. So I'd like to say that Terry has enjoyed a very rewarding career as an interpretive naturalist with Sandbanks Provincial Park and Quinte Conservation. For many years, he wrote a nature column in the Picton Gazette, the Trentonian, and several other local newspapers. Over the years, Terry has given many excellent presentations to PECFN members. We learned about bats. We had a guided walk of the Millennium Trail and Main Duck Island as well. And we saw the county from a different perspective in his aerial tour, Come Fly With Me. So Terry has written 5 books about his life and pursuits as a naturalist in the county. He owns and maintains his own website, Nature Stuff. Today, he will tell us about his work coordinating the marsh monitoring program in which PECFN members have taken part at Wesley Acres wetland. We usually monitor marsh birds there, but we are now going to learn about frogs. Please welcome Terry Sprague. And Terry, could you share your screen, please?
Well, I'm trying. I'm getting a lot of other messages over top of it. But I do want to say, as I'm trying to figure this out, I'm always amused with these Zoom presentations. It's almost like we're holding a seance. We're joining hands and we're saying, can you hear me? I can hear you. I always am reminded of that. Okay, I just want to try a couple of things here before we begin. From current slide. All right, and I just want to check a setting that I have here. And that's okay. All right. And in continuing along the lines of having a seance, can you see everyone can see the photo, everyone can see me? Nod your heads. Yeah, this is a brand spanking new, thank you. This is a brand spanking new presentation that I put together. So when did I go from being a birder to a frogger? Well, I never really did. I just started getting my interest in frogs back quite a few years ago, which I'm going to explain the origin of this evening. It's kind of hard to, really love frogs in a way because they are so expressionless. They always seem to be sad for some reason. The only time they have happy faces is in cartoons, I guess. And, they always have a very sad face. So how did I get started in this? Well, it all started with the Community Wildlife Monitoring Program. That's an initiative of the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan to complement the efforts that they were undertaking to remediate and monitor the Bay of Quinte. And one of those monitoring programs was this one, the Marsh Monitoring or the Community Wildlife Monitoring Program. And it was initiated in 2001. And the coordinator at that time did an amazing job. Her name was Eileen Beauvais, as I recall, and she just had so much energy. But then she got another job the next year, and the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan wanted to keep the momentum of that program going. So they contacted me and sort of with tongue in cheek because they knew that I was very busy at Quinte Conservation. I had my own outdoor program that I was running, and it was taking off with leaps and bounds. I guess because at the time there was really no one else doing anything similar, doing guided hikes and that sort of thing. That's all changed now. There are tons of people out there doing guided hikes. But I was doing guided hikes, canoe and kayak tours, aerial tours, bus tours, boat tours to Main Duck Island, and all of these happening about 6 days a week during the operating season. And I had the Adopt an Acre program to look after. I produced all the printed material at Quinte Conservation, including the conservation dinner programs, the brochures, year-end reports, and on top of that, once a week I was the curator of the O'Hara Mill Museum in Madoc. So I was really, really busy. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to take on being the coordinator of this program. But BQ RAP said, that's Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan, they said, well, don't worry about it. It's just an interim position until we can find someone to carry on this momentum. 19 years later, I was still the coordinator, overseeing somewhere in the area of 40 to 60 volunteers every year. It's kind of hard to tell for sure because there was quite a turnover. People would come, people would do it for a while, get tired of it, and someone else would move in. And in addition, Birds Canada, which administered the program, or which administered part of the program, they made me a regional coordinator for this part of Ontario. So now I was responding to interested volunteers from Cobourg to Kingston and north to Highway 7 and getting them planted in their survey stations. Well, to make a long story short, I did manage to retire as coordinator about 5 years ago, but I continued to do the workshops on the marsh monitoring program and Frog Watch Ontario in early March. We just had one actually, a Zoom presentation just a few weeks ago. But we started doing the Zoom format after COVID shut down things for us. So it's been an interesting program. The program ultimately had 4 different components. I deleted 2 of them because I didn't think they were necessary. It was a bit of an overlap to some of the existing programs we were doing, and I said, let's keep 2 programs and let's do them well. So I was off and running. I was getting really enthused about this. And I look back and I wonder, where in the world did I ever have all this energy? Because I surely don't have it now. But we would hold these workshops the first part of March and invite people out to hear my spiel on the program, what it entailed in the effort to try and get volunteers. And we would attract probably 80 or 90 people in this boardroom of Quinte Conservation, and they were very, very enthusiastic, and we got a lot of volunteers each year out of that. Personally, I think they came for the Oreo cookies that I put out for them, but anyway, that said, we did get quite a few volunteers, and I've got to tell you this story because it's funny. We used to do, as part of the advertising campaign, we used to do radio advertising. And we would have these little 15-second slots on the radio, on all the local radio stations. And originally, I did the recordings at CJBQ in Belleville. And the script would be written for me. And I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to what they had written. My main interest was in getting that material, that script, in exactly 15 seconds, not over, not under, 15 seconds. Well, there's one ad, and there were several, and there were 15-second ads, as I said. It was about frogs, and the script went, my best friends are frogs, and my friends may be in trouble. And then the narration continued until it was finished at the end of 15 seconds. Well, I was in Picton one day at No Frills, and a friend of mine who worked there, who has since passed away, he came to me very quietly And he put his hand on my shoulder and he kind of drew me a little closer to him. And he said, Terry, he says, if frogs are your best friends, we've got to get you off Big Island. Well, I never laughed so much in my life when he said that. It was just so funny. You had to know this person to really appreciate it. But anyway, we had a great time at these workshops, but sadly, we had to stop them during COVID and we went with the Zoom presentations after that. And it's still drawing a lot of people. And I'm still doing that. I'm not involved in the community wildlife monitoring program now, except for having these workshops every year in March. What else can I say? Well, here it is, the Community Wildlife Monitoring Program. There are two components of that program, Frog Watch Ontario and the Marsh Monitoring Program. The Frog Watch Ontario was designed primarily with families in mind, that they could get their kids out and enjoy nature and be doing something useful and monitoring frogs. And basically, they could go anywhere they wanted. If there were frogs calling in their backyard, they could record them. It didn't matter how many times a week they did it. It was just very free and easy. Where the marsh monitoring program was a little more structured, it actually provided a bit of more usable data for us in determining, how things were going in the Bay of Quinte marshes. And we always like to think that, okay, introduce yourself to the Frog Watch Ontario program, and then maybe you'll work yourself up to the marsh monitoring program, which a lot of them did do. So I would start out by saying that monitoring frogs in the Bay of Quinte area was really quite easy. And I would start out by saying that Canada is home to 24 species of frogs, but we don't have to worry about learning the identity of 24 species of frogs. Because in this area we have a total of 10 species of frogs and toads, and 8 of them are found commonly in the immediate Bay of Quinte area, and that was the area that we were primarily concerned with. We started with the wood frog. Whoops, sorry. We started with the wood frog, and these are listed in the order in which they generally start singing in the spring of the year. Wood frogs are the earliest ones. They will begin singing. In fact, it would surprise me if they're not singing right now as we speak. They seem to like the ponds around wooded areas. The chorus frogs, they're the ones that you hear singing from the ditches every spring. And as soon as the weather warms up a little more, we'll start to hear them very soon. Spring peepers and American toads come next, although there was a spring peeper found here just last week, I believe, in Prince Edward County. And these are all temperature regulated. So these early ones are quite accustomed to singing when the air temperature is quite chilly, where the next ones, they like to wait until it warms up a little more, the leopard frog and the gray tree frog. And the green frog and the bullfrog, they like to have the air room temperature, so to speak. So they wait until much later before they start to sing. Now I've got a couple here in brackets, and there's a reason for that. The pickerel frog, listed here on the right, we do have them, but I don't think they're very common, and a lot of people mistakenly identify pickerel frogs because they're very similar to leopard frogs in appearance, and they tend to like the cold water streams, so they're not something you're going to typically find in a cattail marsh. The mink frog, I always used to think was a northern frog, and indeed it is. You used to hear them a lot and still do at Algonquin Provincial Park. I have heard them at O'Hara Mill, just north of Madoc. And we heard a whole bunch of them one time calling at Frontenac Provincial Park. And I began to think, Frontenac Provincial Park isn't that far north. Maybe I've been, misinterpreting why these frogs typically seem to be more in northern locations. And I think it's connected directly to the presence of the Canadian Shield. They will follow the Canadian Shield along, and that's what they like. Hence why we would find them at Frontenac Provincial Park, because Frontenac Park is right on the Frontenac Arch, and that extends right down into Kingston and on into the Adirondack. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were singing there too. So the Frog Watch Ontario program was fun and fairly easy, easily appealing to kids and families. You could record frogs and toads at any time by sight or sound, very little time required, twice a week, and it first launched to the public in 2000, which kind of coincides with when the Community Wildlife Monitoring Program first got underway. And the one bonus with the Frog Watch Ontario program is that they have their own website, and it's a beautiful website, and you can learn all you need to know about the frogs in this area. You can submit your observations there. You just set up an account type thing, type deal, and enter your data right online. The beauty of this website too is there is a spot here where you can identify frogs. So let's pull one up here at random. This is the green frog. You can pull up any species that you want, and you'll wonder, what do they sound like? So you click on the symbol. It's called. So frogs in the Bay of Quinte. Okay, we've just listened to the green frog. Oh, what other frogs do we have? Well, we have the wood frog, and this little wood frog, one of the earliest frogs to start calling in the spring. I took a picture of this at Vanderwater Conservation Area, just south of Tweed, across from Thomasburg. A very, very tiny little frog. It was sitting on a log, and I just took that with a normal lens. He wasn't the least bit concerned about me being in the area at all. And I had quite a group of people with me on this particular hike, and he remained absolutely still while I took his picture. They sound a little bit like ducks quacking. And then we have the chorus frog, the ones that I mentioned earlier that you hear calling from the roadside ditches. And then we start with the spring peepers as the weather begins to warm a little more. Again, very, very tiny. They can fit nicely on a dime, I think, if you set them there. They're the ones that produce this huge din in the spring of the year, thousands of them calling out there. And it sounds almost like bells on a sleigh in the wintertime. It's what they remind me of, but there's just a single one here calling. Very appropriately named. And then the American toad. I love to hear them. Mainly because no two American toads sound alike. They all call in a different tone or a different pitch. When I used to work at the Conservation Authority in Picton at Macaulay Mountain Conservation Area, quite often I would have school kids there, and we would do pond studies. And I had this one group from Quinte School in Ameliasburg. This was in 1991. And they were out there splashing around. There were probably 12 or 15 of them in total. This is only part of them here. And you can almost see here just on the left corner of this top photo, a little bit of grassy growth. Well, there were some reeds and cattails, very small number of cattails growing just to the left of this picture. And these kids were out there splashing around, making a noise like kids can. But this frog, this toad, this American toad, it was singing away there like there wasn't anything concerning it whatsoever. And again, I approached this toad. I got right up close to it with, I think I had a Pentax camera back then, just a film camera. No lens, no close-up lens, and I just got down ever so much closer, and he never flinched at all. He just kept singing away like I wasn't even there. He was really turned on. One of my more memorable experiences. And then we have the leopard frog. Everyone is familiar with the leopard frog, I'm sure, but I'll play the song anyway. And I'm going to throw in the pickerel frog. Notice how much similar it looks to the leopard frog, except the background color is more of a creamy color. And it's a little bit more throaty. Then we get into this mink frog that I was talking about earlier that typically is a bit north of the Bay of Quinte. It seems, from my own observations anyway, seems to prefer the Canadian Shield rather than your typical areas where frogs would normally be found. And listen carefully and tell me if you don't think that these mink frogs calling don't sound like a team of horses going across a wooden bridge. Not a sound you're going to hear around here at all, but you don't have to go very far in order to hear them sing. And the gray tree frog. This is one that I still get a lot of calls about. They hear this frog calling, they think it's a bird calling, and these frogs, you can see the little suction cups on the feet there. They can actually climb trees. They'll climb the side of your house, as one did with us one night, and got up close to the open bathroom window and called all night long, kept us awake. And they're hard to find because they blend right in. They can change color. You see how they adapt to their background? Just amazing little frogs. And the green frog, we were introduced to him just a little earlier, but I'll play the song again. Sounds a little bit like somebody strumming the loose chord on a banjo. And a lot of people mistake these for bullfrogs, and there's a way to tell the difference. They do look similar superficially, but look at this lateral line. It goes right along the full length of the frog, where with the bullfrog, it curls down like so. Here's another picture, I think, right here. The green frog with the long lateral line. I'll play it again. A lot of them in the Big Island Marsh. And then we have the mighty bullfrog. And you won't hear them anytime soon. They like to have their water and the air temperature at, more like a room temperature. So the marsh monitoring, it had frog monitoring. That was the component that most people signed up for, but there was also bird monitoring, which was a little more challenging. So I would say probably 80% of people who registered for the marsh monitoring program signed up for the frog monitoring because they found the bird monitoring a little intimidating. But then they could move over if they wanted to. So just talking a little bit about the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan and, what its purpose is and what's going on as compared to the rest of the Great Lakes area. And here are all these different areas of concern around the Great Lakes Basin. And here we are down here. And we all have our different little specific problems that we're trying to address as time goes on to improve the water conditions and environmental conditions. And here we are here, the Bay of Quinte. The nearest one to us is Port Hope. That's the Port Hope area of concern. And I believe Port Hope Harbor was designated an area of concern back around 1987, I think. Under the Canada-U.S. Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. The story is that industrial activity from the El Dorado mining and refining between 1933 and 1953 contaminated over 80,000 cubic meters of sediment with low-level radioactive material within the turning basin and the west slip of the Port Hope Harbor. So that's their problems that they're trying to address. We have our own specific problems. You know, we're making progress. A lot of them are making progress. You'll see some here that have been already delisted because of remedial actions or remedial plans that they've taken. So there are 43 areas of concern in total. Now, these dots indicate what we call routes, monitoring routes. And a monitoring route can have anywhere from one monitoring site to up to 8. Not too many people have as many as 8, because when you have 8, it doesn't become fun anymore. It becomes more like work. So most of them have only one site to monitor, maybe 2, maybe 3. I'm not quite sure what these colored dots designate. It could be, I think this was an interactive map that I copied this from, and I think when you clicked on each of the dots, it specified the route and how many monitoring stations there were, who was doing it, and so forth, all the history in a pull-up menu. So it's you know, been a very successful program, especially in Ontario, in the Lake Ontario area, where you can see there's quite a cluster here, especially down in the Bay of Quinte area of Lake Ontario, where we had a lot of volunteers working. Now, obviously, we're interested in the Bay of Quinte proper. This whole stretch of blue that you see running through here and around here, this is all part of the Bay of Quinte. But the Bay of Quinte watershed is a huge area. And well, we'll start here in the Kingston area, and it goes up through part of Frontenac Provincial Park, goes under Bon Echo Provincial Park, past Scutamata Lake, and just south of Bancroft, and goes way up here into the Haliburton areas just south of Dorset, and then takes a more or less direct route down to Lake Ontario, south of Lake Scugog and Rice Lake, and just north of Presqu'île Provincial Park. This would be in a different watershed here. And it goes and takes in all of Ameliasburg Township, all of Sophiasburg Township, and then follows the bay shore along, including the northern stretch of Amherst Island. So in that area, it's 18,000 square kilometers. It includes all the lands drained by the Trent, Moira, and Napanee rivers, and I could include the Salmon River, I guess, too, and a host of smaller tributaries, and it's 3 times larger than Prince Edward Island. So by comparison, the Quinte Conservation jurisdictional area is only 6,200 square kilometers. So, you know, it's a huge, huge area, and all of this water eventually drains down into the Bay of Quinte. So whatever takes place up here will affect the waters down here. So it's not just the Bay of Quinte that we're interested in. So I was trying to get volunteers from all up and through here. Just take a swig of water. So what's the big deal with amphibians anyway? Why are we monitoring them? Well, number one, they're wetland dependent. They have very sensitive eggs and skin. They're sedentary, which means they stay around, they don't wander too far. And it's been said that an American toad, for instance, probably in its lifetime won't wander any more than 2 kilometers. And to me, that even sounds like a lot of distance. Very wide distribution, so it's a perfect subject for all of the Great Lakes. A lot of public interest. People seem to like frogs, and it's a good starting point. Now, one of the concerns around here, of course, is agricultural runoff because of the amount of intense agricultural activity on both sides of the Bay of Quinte and throughout the Bay of Quinte watershed, actually. And we are very concerned about agricultural runoff. And I'm going to mention one agricultural chemical, and I don't wish to belabor this subject at all because it is only one of many chemicals that may be entering our water courses and wetlands, and that product is atrazine. Now, I have no idea to what extent, if at all, that atrazine is being used in today's crops. It is a product that was invented in 1958 in Europe, where it is now banned, but it's still sold in the United States and Canada. And it's used primarily on corn. It's a vegetation killer, and it kills all the vegetation in the field that the corn is growing, but not the corn, because corn is able to detoxify the atrazine, but kills all other competing vegetation all around it. And it was actually banned, as I mentioned earlier, in Europe 20 years ago because of its persistent groundwater contamination. And if there's anybody listening tonight who can bring me up to date on atrazine, and is it still being sold here? Are people, farmers using it on their corn crops, or are they using something totally different now? I don't know. I've been out of the farming scene since 1976. Which bears mentioning that in the early 1970s, someone approached us and said, hey, why are you using 2,4-D? Why are you still cultivating your corn? Why don't you use atrazine? So we got atrazine. This was only 1 year. And it was a powder, as I recall, that you mixed in with your tank of water and you sprayed it over the field. It killed all the vegetation. And as I was mixing it up, I told Dad, I said, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with this product at all. It just doesn't seem right that we should be using something like this. So Dad said, well, we'll use it this 1 year and see how things go. And so it worked. It killed the vegetation. We had a wonderful crop of corn, didn't have to cultivate it. And because we were very much into crop rotation, we decided, well, we'll plow up the corn stubble and we'll put oats on this same field next year. Well, the oats came up, as oats are supposed to do, but they only came up 3 inches. It never grew anymore. And we decided we're not using this product anymore. It's just too dangerous. We can't, I don't think we should be doing this. So we stopped using it. Now, what does it do to amphibians once it enters the water? Well, it has been shown to actually render male frogs sterile and turn 1 in 10 of them into females. Now, both of these copulating frogs, and I think they're supposed to be bullfrogs, they're genetically male, but the larger one on the bottom has been completely feminized by atrazine exposure and produces viable eggs. Incredible. So, at the end of the day, does it really matter if a marsh ends up having more females than male frogs? Well, yeah, it does. It's not natural. It's not nature. It's not what nature intended. It totally upsets the ecosystem, the ratio of one sex over another. But like I say, I don't know to what extent frogs are being affected by atrazine or to what extent atrazine is still being used. Interestingly, now this is something that is not connected, I don't think, to water quality. It just happens. And 3 years ago, a lady, a participant actually, their son found this frog. This looks like the Belleville boat launch to me. I think that's where they found it. And that frog could really motor because instead of having 4 legs, it had 7. And I explained to them, it's really nothing to be too concerned about. It's a species of tiny aquatic parasite called a trematode, I think it's called, which is basically a flatworm, and it embeds itself into the developing leg tissue of a tadpole, and it causes an assortment of defects such as multiple legs, as in the case of this one, or in rare cases, no legs at all. It happens. I've never found one myself, but apparently they do occur from time to time. There's nothing really too much to be concerned about. Very briefly, the program also included bird monitoring for the same reasons pretty much that we monitored frogs. Again, wetland dependent, wide distribution, easy to count. I say that with tongue in cheek because a lot of people were intimidated by birds and by the vast number of them, and could they identify them? There was a lot of public interest, and we were specifically zeroing in on six or seven target species, such as the pied-billed grebe, for instance, and a few others, who are very reluctant to make our acquaintance, so to speak, and they call out from behind the vegetation. So you could be out there monitoring for birds and not even know these things exist out there, these 6 species that we were targeting. So we had it's an MP3 file now, but it started out as a CD. And you played the CD, and if it was out there, it would interpret that CD call as an intruder, and it would call out or even maybe appear, and then we could count it. Otherwise, we might not know it was even out there. So I would tell people, don't worry too much if you can't identify everything that you see. Just pretend it didn't exist, or give me a call and describe the bird to me. Chances are I'll know what it is. So that kind of calmed them down a little bit, and we got a little bit larger number of bird monitors. Oh, I know this person. Something that I would do during my time with the Community Wildlife Monitoring Program, the Marsh Monitoring Program in particular, is that I would designate a day in May, and I would take these people out who were doing the bird surveys to a wetland location. We're on the Millennium Trail at Hubbs Creek Marsh in this particular photo, but mostly I took them to the Frink Center, where there's a marsh boardwalk and wide open spaces, and went through the protocol with them on playing the CD, and it was a 15-minute exercise, and showed them how to do it. And that seemed to help out quite a bit, to have this this exercise whereby they could hear the very birds that we were describing at our workshops. So the basic overview of the frog surveys, we're done with the bird surveys now. The basic overview of the frog surveys, that each route was monitored 3 times per year for 3 minutes at a time. So it wasn't a big deal, it didn't take very long to do, between April and June. And these dates, they would coincide with when the explosive breeders would start to call. For instance, you'd have your early ones calling during this period. And these were only guidelines. You get some years, and I remember one year in particular, we actually went to Frontenac Provincial Park, a few of us, and we did a hike there, March 20th. And there were 5 species of frogs calling that early. It was incredible. And I came back and I sent an email to all the participants, and I say, forget about April 15th. Get out there now, this week if possible, and record these explosive breeders before they stop calling. Because once they stop calling, you won't know how many are actually out there. Then May 15th to the 30th was the second survey. You could do it on any one of those dates, not all those dates, just pick a date when the weather was right. And you would get all those later frogs that I mentioned earlier that started calling a few months or a few weeks later. And you may get a few of these chiming in as well. And then it got a little more confusing as you got to hear you had all the species of frogs calling to some degree. And there were guidelines, that you had to abide by, the temperature especially. So that was basically it in a nutshell. So what have we been seeing from this exercise? It's always kind of nice to know, you send all this data in, what happens to it, what do they determine from it? And this is the most recent, and a lot of this is very positive, that populations of most frog species remain stable. However, there's always a however, coarse frogs showed a declining population and continue to do so. And just 3 weeks ago, I've got this information in brackets that populations in Quebec are documented to have declined at a rate of 37% over 10 years and are expected to continue to decline. Not only in Quebec, it's happening here. Don't really know why this is happening. It, coarse frogs in particular could be due to habitat loss, as they tend to occupy vernal ponds and ditches in low areas, and these are disappearing, due to urban sprawl and their critical breeding habitat being leveled and filled in. So I suspect that that's the reason why chorus frogs are dropping in numbers. However, the good news is that green frogs, spring peepers, and wood frogs showed an increasing population, and that is indeed very promising information. Around here, we do have other concerns. These may not be concerns in other parts of Ontario, although I suspect it probably is. You probably recognize this plant as Phragmites, very invasive. You may also recognize the location, which is Presqu'île Provincial Park, and the boardwalk that goes through almost like a tunnel now. And wherever Phragmites grows, the native cattails just disappear, and it's popping up all over the place, and it's really, really a concern. And to give you an example how fast Phragmites can spread, this is I call it the Bald Head Peninsula. It's actually the Wellers Bay National Wildlife Area owned by the Canadian Wildlife Service. It goes for a distance of about, I think it's about 7 or 8 kilometers. Very close to what the sand spit is at Sandbanks. And it goes down to here, and this goes down to Barcoven. And I'm not too sure who owns this. But here, part way down, there was a channel that went through here. This is Bald Head Island over here, and that we have bald eagles nesting over there, by the way. This channel was created, let me get back here. This channel was created by something called an ice shove, which happens in about this time of year, actually, when the ice is leaving, and it's forced by prevailing westerlies to such an extent that it actually carves out a channel. And flowing ice is powerful. We just had a case here on Big Island where the winds sent all the ice flows going down the Bay of Quinte up onto the road for a distance of about at least a half a kilometer. And bulldozers and backhoes had to come over and get it off the road so traffic could go through. It's very powerful. So it dug out a channel here in Wellers Bay, between Wellers Bay and Lake Ontario, about 8 feet deep, and I think it was 150 feet wide. And at that time, we're talking about 1856, I think, 1856 and 1857. At that time, lake freighters were able to go through that channel over here to where there used to be a wharf, and I'll show you that picture in a moment, and load up iron ore that came down from Marmora. Came down what is now the Millennium Trail, and there was a little spur that came in here that not too many people know about. I've been in there, but it's it's a job to get in there. It's pretty grown up. But anyway, they were using that area. Now, here we are again at that same time, about 2004, I think it was. The channel is still there. It was very shallow. I did see a motorboat go through there, although it was pretty shallow. You can see a sandbar here. And I was doing a kayak tour through here, and everything seemed to be normal. There was some Phragmites growing here in the background. 2 years later, I did another kayak tour, and this is what we came upon. This is not the channel. This is actually Wellers Bay right here. The channel is somewhere in here, I suspect, where this little indentation is. And here's that old wharf, the remains of it. And this is the sand spit over here on the opposite shore. We keep trying. This is the Big Island Marsh. I live right here. And when my wife and I first moved to this house after we sold the farm, we moved to this house, this lot that we had bought or severed from the farm. The Big Island Marsh was completely a dense mat of cattails. There was nothing out there but red-winged blackbirds, swamp sparrows. There was the odd marsh wren calling, as I recall. And in 2013, Quinte Conservation embarked on a project. It went all year and into the next year of dredging out these channels, creating these channels that were
You
never
might
going
be interested in this. Terry Sprague.
what was that? I'm sorry. Somebody have a question?
Terry, I think somebody might not have known that they weren't muted.
Oh, okay. If that is the case, please check the symbol to see if you are muted. And if you aren't, please mute yourself. This is the original channel that came through here. This is quite interesting. This is the original channel. It was dredged out. But at the time that this was done, it was filled right in. There was nothing. It was all marsh. You couldn't even tell where the channel was except here and there. My father was actually born in this house down here where my cursor is. He said as a boy, he used to skate all the way from here, which is near Northport, all the way the full length, which is about 3 or 4 kilometers, to Muscogee Bay. No problem. That marsh grew into such an extent that that was no longer possible. So when Quinte Conservation contracted out this project to a local contractor, and he was responsible for bringing in all these high holes, and there are 4 here, but there are actually a total of 9. And it was almost it was almost like a ballet to watch them. I was put in charge of monitoring what was going on and taking pictures as the project progressed. And what they would do is they would climb onto these log mats that were all chained together, looked like a raft, and they would move these ahead of the high hole as they progressed out into the marsh, because it is a floating mat of cattails. Mind you now, hundreds and hundreds of years, this mat has thickened to a depth of about 2 feet, and I did see it at 3 feet in places, but it was still floating on the water. And it was really an eerie sensation to be beside one of these high holes and feel the sensation when they dug into the cattails, and you could feel the whole thing kind of sinking about 6 inches, then it would kind of spring back up again. But none of them fell through, and it was a successful project. But what they did was they would pass the dredged material as far as they could reach over to here. The next high hole would take it over to here, and so forth until they reached the shoreline. And then trucks would truck it away. So that went on for the entire year. And they created a pond here, Sprague's Pond, it's called. It's 12 acres in size. Smaller ones here at 6 acres in size, and all these interconnecting channels, sinuous channels, which tend to optimize breeding habitat for waterfowl. So what has been the result? It's just been incredible. Right at the moment, as I speak, we have tundra swans down in here and mute swans. And later on, there will be pied-billed grebes and American bitterns. It's just, and a few shorebirds once in a while. It is just an absolute delight to go down here. There's a little boat launch that they've created and watch all the wildlife that we never saw before. There's been fish migration. It's been really successful. And this was all a privately funded project, privately funded by OPG, Ontario Power Generation, who apparently were doing a project in the Oshawa area that did irreparable harm to a wetland there. And the idea is it's a mitigation type thing deal that they are mandated to donate X number of dollars. In this case, it was $5 million to create this project. And then they donated more money, and they did a little bit over here, but not too much. But this was the main project here, and it's been just a wonderful success. And it's patterned after the very successful Saugwin Marsh project. This is Mountain View. You can't see this from the highway. Maybe in the winter you can, to a certain extent. You got to fly over it, as I did here, to get this picture. again, channels that they dredged out. It's been extremely successful. And I always was reluctant to get marsh monitors in here because it looks easy enough, but you get down at the level of the cattails, I'm telling you, it's hard to find your way out. I always recommended everybody take a sleeping bag in their kayak or canoe and maybe some lunch, because you might be there overnight before you find your way out. So that's the Bay of Quinte Community Wildlife Monitoring Program, where I initially became more interested in frogs than what I had been in the earlier days. And I learned a lot, and it was a fun project. So just kind of summarizing here, the two possible programs: the Frog Watch Ontario, which I said was an entry-level project that kids and families could do, and was very simple, very easy, very basic to do. The Marsh Monitoring Program, a little more structured, restricted to marshes or seasonally flooded meadows. Two components: you could do either frog monitoring or bird monitoring, or both. Now, if anyone listening is interested in doing the marsh monitoring program, and there's still time to get enrolled, don't call me. Don't call me. I'm no longer involved in that. You contact Sarah Midland Jones at the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan at this address here, and I will leave that up for a couple of seconds. So it's learning about frogs. It's always nice when you learn something new in nature, and learning frogs and being able to identify them by their sounds, by their calls. And they are very different. It's just such a rewarding experience. So that said, I am going to open the floor now to any questions you may have. And I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you again for joining us. We had a great crowd. Amy, or whomever.
Okay, so Terry, I want to give some time here. I'll put on my video too. So we don't have many questions yet. So please type in your questions if you have any for Terry. At least I'm not seeing them on the screen. I have a question for you, Terry, but I'll start with a comment
Okay.
from Helen Fearman. Before you started, she said, and congratulations to Terry on receiving the King Charles III Coronation Medal.
Oh my goodness.
So that was very nice.
It was a very profound experience to be standing with, I think it was more than a half dozen others in Tyler Alsop's office at Rossmore, and watching volunteers who I believe were probably more deserving than I, and receive these medals and certificates. It was a great experience. And you know, really all I want to do is just sit down and you know, sit back and take a nap. You know, it's very flattering, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Helen.
Great. Okay, we have a request from Jan Hendry. Can you show the email address for the BQRAF person again for Sarah Midland Jones, please?
Right there at the bottom of the screen.
Great. Okay, Terry, so I have a question which I'm just going to ask you verbally. With this work that's been done in Big Island and around there, do you think it needs to be, are things beginning to fill in from the work that they did to open up the waters there from the
No, I don't think,
cattails?
I didn't elaborate on that very well. When I said it was patterned after the very successful Saugwin Marsh project, it's because the Saugwin Marsh project was done in 1998, and you go in there today and nothing has filled in. I don't know what their secret.
Wow.
I think it was the depth, probably, sharp faces of the edges of the where they had dredged it out, and they used the same method in the Big Island Marsh, and nothing has changed at all. There's a lot of pond growth there, but you know, that happens in any body of water, and that disappears. But no, nothing. I don't think anything, to my notion anyway, nothing has changed at all. Quinte Conservation is in there quite often every year. doing sampling to see what wildlife is in there, what fish life primarily, and they're getting good results. They're very, very happy with the results.
That's excellent. Thanks, Terry. Okay, I've got a few more questions and comments. So from Carla, she goes, "Thank you very much, Terry, for a very informative presentation. Is there anything homeowners can do to help frogs if their property backs onto a marsh? I had a larger frog toad last summer who would jump into a planter that I put dirt in for him and dig in on hot summer days."
Yeah, you can do things for toads, especially, and they're always nice to have around the garden. Very beneficial. And you can use flower pots, and invert the flower pots with just a little space, for them to crawl under on the one edge. That you can do, of course, with other species of frogs. It depends on what species we're talking about. You can. I always have frogs in my water feature that I have in my backyard. There are always frogs hopping around there, and I like to think that it's the presence of water that attracted them there in the first place. Uh, I can't think of anything offhand unless someone else has some ideas that they want to share.
Okay, anybody else want to jump in there? Okay, not yet. All right, so I'm going to go through this in order. The next one is from a comment from Terry, or a question from Jerry. Terry, do you know how OPG chose the Big Island site?
I don't know. There seemed to be a list of possible projects, and whatever Quinte Conservation did to sway their decision, I congratulate them. I don't really know. I should find that out possibly because it is a common question. Uh, why did they pick the Big Island Marsh? But they continue to be interested in the Big Island Marsh. Like I said, they did the west side of the causeway.
Mhm.
Were able to provide a little bit of money for that. Not a whole lot because they couldn't do too much with what they had. Uh, but I don't really know.
Mhm. Okay, thanks, Terry. Now, there's a message from Marjorie. Okay, and this is going back to Sarah Midland Jones's address. Is there a typo in her address? Sarah Midland Jones is S Midlane Jones in the email. So there's an E at the end of Midland instead of a D. There's an E. So
No,
it says
it's
S
an
Midlane
it's
Jones.
it's an E.
It's an E. Okay, so that's correct.
Oh, sorry. No, it is a D. That was my mistake. I typed
Oh,
that.
okay. Okay. So in the address there, it should be SMIDLAND Jones at BQR. It's still up on the screen. So just change
Yep.
that first E to a D. Is
Yep.
that correct? Okay, great. Okay, wait a minute. Now I've got two new messages. I'm trying to figure this out. Zoom keeps on changing. Okay, so from Jan, there's a spelling disparity between the surname of Sarah and her email address. Should the email be, okay, so she's asking the same question. Okay, now we've got something. Okay, more on Sarah Midland Jones. Okay. So Carla, then we'll go on. We'll leave the whole thing with the email address. Carla says, I think many at the back by the marsh where she lives are tree frogs. So that's nice. And I think I heard some wood frogs this week, Terry. I just want you to know.
Quite
Okay.
likely. They
Yeah,
start calling.
yeah. Okay, now everything's opened again because you're not sharing screen, so I can see everybody. Any more questions from anyone? Just type them in there. Marjorie, do you want to say yours? You've got your hand up. If so, you need to unmute.
Hi. Kate remarked that Sarah's name is with an E and the email is correct.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to verify that. You got me confused now. I'll be right with you. At least I hope so. I don't see anybody at the moment.
It's all right if I unmute. I could clarify my comment.
It's with an E.
With an
M-
E. So you're right.
Midlane.
Okay. So your email address is correct. Marjorie, thank you for correcting that. And Kate, thank you for verifying that. That's excellent. So, Terry,
Yes.
I ask a question. And then there's one from Paula here. So it interests me too that you grew up becoming really, really, really interested in nature and also did it as a farmer, which is moving to me. So did you grow up hearing a lot of frogs?
I did. I was always interested in nature on the farm, and I guess most farmers are to a certain extent. But I was very lucky to have a school teacher in grade 6, 7, and 8 who sort of encouraged me to pursue nature. And I guess, being a farmer, living near water all the time, yes, I took an interest in the frogs, but I didn't know a whole lot of them. I knew, I guess leopard frogs probably, and toads and bullfrogs, but that was about the extent of it. I didn't know the others at all until I got into this program and kind of renewed my interest, so to speak.
It's great. Okay, we've got a question from Paula Peel. I'm at risk of showing my ignorance, but what are those sacks on some of the frog pictures?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just reading a message that came in. What was the question again?
Oh, from Paula. I'm at risk of showing my ignorance, but what are those sacks on some of the frog pictures or pics, she writes.
I wonder if she's referring to the toads.
Probably. They're
yeah,
kind of blown up. Yeah.
Yeah, they're natural bumps and they have, I think, 3 warts or something like that. But it's natural. It's very natural.
Okay.
All the other frogs are quite smooth.
And sometimes you show photos of frogs that almost look like they have balloons coming out of the sides of them.
Could be singing.
Yeah, I think it's from singing.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
They really puff up.
When they sing. Okay.
Yeah. The stomach goes in and out, and of course that air sac under their throat.
Okay, so we have a comment here from Stephen Moore. Atrazine is an herbicide registered, okay, it's a little blocked here, for use in Canada on corn, sorghum, and switchgrass only. However, it is also used on canola and to kill weeds on non-cropland. Atrazine is produced in Canada by BASF and Syngenta and sold to farmers under the brand names Laddick, Atrix Liquid 480, Marksman, Prime Extra 2 Magnum, Converge 480, Frontier Max Plus, Lumax EZ, Acuron, and A22668. Wow, that's kind of wild. Okay, so atrazine, including related triazines, was in the top 10 highest selling herbicides in Canada from 2008 when data was first published up to 2015, and national sales continued to be over 500,000 kilograms of active ingredient annually as of 2020. And then he has some links in the chat. So anybody can go to the chat to see these. This is the most recent data he could find.
Yeah, I recognize some of those names that were mentioned. It's funny, or not funny, actually. It's very sad that these lethal products are disguised under other names that, may not appear to be dangerous at all. And I know that atrazine is being used as a vegetation killer over fields, that aren't being used for corn. And that worries me a little bit that it's being used to that extent.
Yep. Thank you, Stephen, for all of that. Okay, so we have a comment from Carla here. So with the example Terry gave of creating the ponds and water pools in the marsh, Would an example of a healthy marsh be one that does have ponds and pools of open water? Should
Oh,
we look to create this in other marshes, or was it the presence of too many cattails?
Yeah, it's, would you, read that again? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm
So
lost.
this is from Carla. So with the example Terry gave of creating the ponds and water pools in the marsh, would an example of a healthy marsh be one that does have ponds and pools of open water? Should we look to create this in other marshes, or was it the presence of too many cattails that was a
Oh,
problem?
absolutely. Yeah, it's, it's all, you know, boils down to money and availability of it. But a healthy marsh, yes, should have a balance of, or a mix of open water, um, you know, if for no other reason for fish migration, because fish are very important in the environment too. Uh, but yeah, the fact that our marsh, when we first moved over here, was just, it was as close to being dead as you could imagine. And one thing that the channels did eliminate for whatever reason, every year it was a custom for some vandals to set the marsh on fire. And normally it kind of zigzagged around and burned, and nothing too serious happened. There wasn't much habitat lost because the birds weren't nesting that early anyway, but occasionally it would go up into people's back fields and yards, and that was kind of dangerous. It was vandalism,
Mhm.
simple. And as soon as the project got underway, that mysteriously stopped. But as long as I can remember, that marsh was always burned. And it would, people would say, well, we're just trying to do some, well, if you're trying to do some good, why are you doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. We did have a talk recently on muskrats.
Hmm.
And they talked about the narrow-leaved cattails, which is, I guess, a hybrid of cattails that does seem to grow more densely. Do you know anything about that?
Well,
Terry?
I think these were identified primarily as narrow-leaved cattails, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And that could account for, of course, all animals are cyclic anyway, but muskrats were a lot more common back in earlier days than what they are today. There are still people who insist on trapping muskrats. To me, it wouldn't be my idea of spending an afternoon. But yeah, I guess the market isn't there anymore for muskrats anyway, not to the extent that it was. But yeah, I think maybe you're saying that the narrow-leaved cattail was the prime food source?
No, I'm saying that it actually made it is one of the things that was used to account for the drop in muskrat population.
Drop,
It's too
okay.
dense for them to channel through it,
Yeah.
use it as habitat.
I'm just going
Yeah.
by the fact that, there are not as many muskrats as there used to be in the big
Mhm.
marsh, whatever that reason might be.
Yeah. Okay, Terry, I've got some more comments to read. So I've got one from Jan Hendry here. I'm envious of the work that was done on the wetland near you. Why are the chances that some could be done? Okay, why are the chances that some could be done on the clogged wetland on the east? Okay, I think she meant to say, what are the chances that some could be done on the clogged wetland on the east side of Winds Drive Causeway? I don't know where that is, but
Oh, I do. I do.
okay.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know what the situation is there, but I am familiar with the location of that marsh. Again, it just depends on the initiative of local groups, and if somebody wants to, get on the bandwagon and start something, who knows? There might be funds out there to do it. We were just lucky here on Big Island, to have that marsh picked for whatever reason. And I don't know what they recognized there. I guess they recognized that at one time it was a very productive cattail marsh. It's 2,000 acres. It's a huge marsh.
Mhm.
And that maybe it would improve water quality to have that water flowing from Muscogee Bay through the Big Island Marsh and on out into the Bay of Quinte. It's probably that was in the back of their minds, improved water quality as well as the fish habitat and wildlife opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Terry. We have another comment from Stephen Moore, which is also about cattails. The dense growth of cattails can also have negative impacts on the ecosystem. Their thick stands can block sunlight from reaching the water, which can hinder the growth of other aquatic plants. This can be detrimental to fish and other aquatic organisms that rely on a diverse range of plants for food and habitat. In addition to their impact on plant diversity, cattails can also affect water flow and quality. Their dense root systems can slow down water movement, leading to stagnant conditions. This can create an ideal breeding ground for mosquitoes and other pests. Furthermore, cattails can trap sediment and nutrients, leading to increased levels of phosphorus and nitrogen in the water. This can contribute to eutrophication, which is the excessive growth of algae and other aquatic plants, leading to poor water quality. So this seems to speak to, again, opening up these thick cattail
Absolutely.
stands.
You know, if you could just imagine what the Big Island Marsh looked like in more recent years before the channelization, you would appreciate what Stephen is saying there, and Susan, you know, that the marsh was dead. There's no other way to explain it. It was totally dead. And nothing was flowing. There was no open water. The original channel was gone. There were some attempts through another program to do a little bit of dredging over to a little island that sits out there in the marsh called Francis Island, but it's still sort of open, but this was really, really successful.
It's great. It's great. Okay, Terry, that's what we have. I think that pretty well ends our question period and comment period. Thank you all so much. And thanks for the information that came out there and the questions that have been asked. So I'll hand it over to you, Jerry. Thank you, Terry. Just terrific.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Terry. As always, you teach us so much. Your knowledge is so wide, and your experience is so deep. So it's always great to listen to you. Thank you, and thanks for all this time you've given us this evening. We will have a little gift bag for you, which one of us will drop off in the next couple of weeks. And well, thanks again. What can I say? The next PECFN members meeting will be in person, as I said earlier, at the Bloomfield Town Hall, and Laurie and Ron Irwin will present Canada, a photographic journey. That we'll see some really beautiful photographs and probably hear some good stories too. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and hope we see you in person next month. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, you all. Great to see everyone here on Zoom. It's great.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
I'm not.
Bye, Paula. Good.
Hello, Paula.
Hi,
So,
Paula.
Amy-
Bye, Paula. It's just
Amy,
so bright.
I'm not seeing the usual button to end the meeting right now.
Yeah, there's a new thing. It looks like a door, somebody walking out of it, and it says leave. I think it's new. It's down at the right-hand corner of my screen. Do you want me to click it?
Well, I must find it myself.
Okay.
No, why don't you do it?
I see
Okay.
it.
It's a little person walking out a door. I'm going to click it.
Okay, good night.
And then it says leave meeting. Good night. Bye, Marjorie, too. Okay, bye, everyone. Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Amy.